Hi, Abe.
Morning, Mario. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Everything okay?
Yeah.
Good.
We're a little bit early, but
Is this the new time?
hi, Chaim.
We're on page 70.
Yeah.
That's where we left off. Koach Gavra. We're talking about Netilas Yadayim, of course. Koach Gavra and using a faucet. Last week, we talked about the kind of vessel you needed. So did you have a book? Huh?
No. Do you have a book?
Yeah. Okay. I have to get my wife a book. 1 second.
Oh.
Page 70. So in addition to needing a vessel for Netilas Yadayim, Chazal required that the water used for Netilas Yadayim be poured onto one's hand using a person's direct force. That's called Koach Gavra, the force of his person, and it's mentioned by the Gemara in Chulin. Amar of Papa, hi Arisa did loy. They used to have irrigation channels that they took water from a river using buckets. Then they dumped it into these irrigation ditches. It doesn't come directly. There's a current in that channel. So it's not bathing your hands through direct human force. The mikra v'lagabi dula de ka'asim koach gavra. Now, as you're taking the bucket that you dipped in the river and you're dumping that bucket into this irrigation channel and the water gets poured on your hands before it hit the channel, not a dime, that would work. So according to Gemara, the concept of koach gavra disqualifies merely placing one's hands in the water of an irrigation channel, since the water does not move directly due to the force of a person's act of pouring. Placing one's hand underneath the bucket that is used to pour the water from the river into the channel is effective, since the bucket is poured directly by a person, and that is classified as koach gavra. The Shulchan Aruch brings this down as a psak halacha in our siman kuf nun tes. The water has to be poured on your hands by the force of by a person. Lefichach tzinor shedoy l'mayim and ayor v'shofach bo v'nimshach min ha'mayim lashkos hasoda, a side irrigation channel that has been dug from a river and or you pour from a bucket into a river, and the irrigation channel streams into a field. You can't put your hands in the irrigation ditch. It's not coming directly from human action. Even if we'll say that the person had taken it from a bucket from a river and dumped it into the irrigation channel, once you dumped it, that the koach gavra is gone. If you put your hands where the bucket was being dumped into the irrigation channel, so we're talking about putting it in the irrigation channel close to where the water is being dumped into the channel. Means you don't put it directly in the pouring stream. Also on atila, as long as the current is close to where you poured it in, that flow is coming directly from human action. Therefore, this halacha of koach gavra has other important practical applications. Sometimes a person doesn't have a washing cup or another vessel available for netilas yadayim. In such a case, is one permitted to form netilas yadayim by merely opening the faucet above his hands, allowing the water to spill onto his hands? So there are two issues that we have to analyze. When you open a faucet, does that qualify as koach gavra? And does a faucet, which is attached to a wall, have the status of a vessel? So regarding the first issue of whether opening a faucet qualifies as koach gavra, a case discussed by the Rosh may be relevant. The Rosh writes that if a barrel has an opening with a stopper in it, detaching the stopper is classified as koach gavra, because when you remove the stopper, the water flows out. Right? Maim shebachavis, v'yesh bo barza. Barza is like a faucet, like a spigot. Yasra barza, the barza might just be a stopper. V'yachzirenu, because shvicha shvicha v'karibesh shaper koach gavra. If the flow flows from the barrel after you remove the stopper, it's considered koach gavra. Even when you open up the faucet or remove the stopper, the water is going to flow. And the Shulchan Aruch rules this way as well, as explained by the Mishnah Berurah. If there was a stopper in a barrel, and you remove the stopper, and water flows out of the barrel, and it pours on your hands, even though you didn't directly pour the water on your hands, by removing the stopper, the human action caused the water to flow. Each time you pour, you have to close it and then open it up again. And the Mishnah Berurah, it's through his removal that the water is flowing. Perush. We call kiluach v'kiluach. Every spurt. Meaning, once you remove the stopper, it's only the first spurt that's considered koach gavra. The fact that now it's going to flow out of that barrel until the barrel's empty, that's gravity. That's not koach gavra. So you have to open up, take out the stopper, let the water, the first sort of flow, go on one of your hands, and then put the stopper back in, and then remove it and put it on your other hand. if the netila is done with something that's made out of iron, sounds like a spigot. You have to close only the first initial spurt. When you open with a faucet, will be considered koach gavra. The hudak, the spurt is thin. The first spurt's not going to be enough to wash your hand. Like the Rosh, the Shulchan Mishnah hold that one must close and reopen the faucet after every spurt for the Tilsidam to qualify as koach gavra. The Biur Halacha writes that post facto, that means b'diavad, if one did not reopen the faucet each time, it's still a valid netila. Since some opinions hold that only the initial spurt of water that emerges must result from a koach gavra. If one wishes to be strict and wash again with a vessel, he should do so without a bracha. Says the Biur Halacha, b'chol shficha ein mishabur mikol makom, near to be evident lo asakain, if you didn't close the spigot every time, hu choizer v'noitel yadav, if he wants to be machmer and go and wash your hands with the kli again, he could do it, but lo yivarch on the tis yadayim. Ki b'biur agra mitzadi l'das Rambam dai. As long as the initial flow came through the human action of opening up the spigot, it would have been okay. Based upon these sources, turning on the faucet each time would seem to qualify as koach gavra. Nevertheless, the first issue of whether the faucet qualifies as a vessel remains to be dealt with. The Darkei Moshe, who's the Ramah, cites the Aguda, who states that stones set in the wall with a faucet are not defined as a kli unless they were previously formed as one. Because of Chidushei Aguda, Nira Larid, the Ein Lito Yodav Nois and Avanim, Sheyesh Lem Beis Kibul, the Nikba B'Kois V'Yesh Lem Barza, right? You set up some stones that create a receptacle, and it's in a wall with a stopper. If you started off with a kli and you fixated the kli to the wall, then not let me matter. The Ramah, in his commentary, the Shulchan Aruch rules, in accordance with this aguda, Ein li tol yoav me'osan avonim akvum l'koitel v'asa beis kibul uvarza. You can't lechatchila use a stone construct that you made a base kibul with a faucet. But if the stone had created some kind of sink previously, and you attach that to the wall, that would work. The Mishnah Berurah explains that if the stones are set in the wall first, before being designated as a vessel, they are a wall, and they're not a kli. For netis yadayim kli be'inam. For netis yadayim, you need a kli. The kiven shem kvum b'koisel. These stones have been built into a wall. Arein kekoisel. They ain't shem kli aleim. They're not designated as a kli. Even though the stones have been built with a receptacle. However, if the stones were a kli tchila, atam kivan shayalem shem kli tchila betolush parshav netila b'kli. If somehow it was a kli when it was not fixed to the wall, and then you fix it to the wall, so that would be still considered a kli. Okay, based on what we've learned, what is the status of a modern faucet? Rav Ben Zion Abba Shol discusses this issue in his Or L'Tzion and rules that the faucet is not classified as a kli. Rather, it's merely the location from which water emerges after being transported through pipes. There, even if the water is stored in a tank or boiler on the roof, that does not qualify as pouring the water from a kli for the purposes of Netilas Yadayim. Says Rav Abba Shol, Nira lanias daiti. Shaide psichas usgiras beres mayim lamoil l'tisatim the lachshav kli. Opening and closing a faucet, he does not believe fulfills the requirement of a kli for the tilsidayim. The lama boy main chavis mayim begag. If you don't have a receptacle on the roof where everything is coming through pipes, the lomoil shein kan kli, there certainly there's no kli. Says Abashol afilu yesh chavis mayim begag, like in Israel, where they have, they have containers up on the roof. V'mayim bayim me'achavit derech hatzinor leberes. The water is flowing from this tank through pipes into the faucet. It's not considered that you used a kli. The water coming from that barrel or tank is not going directly on your hands. It's going through a pipe. So it's not direct koyach gavra, rather koyach koychoy. It's secondary. However, the Tzitz Eliezer and Yalkut Yosef are lenient. When there's a pressing need, if you have a boiler or a water tank on the roof. L'chatchila, you shouldn't wash through a faucet. But if it's an emergency, you don't have a klil in the tila. Like we said, you have to open and close every time. As long as the water is stored in a tank on the roof. Most homes today do not have any place on the roof for storing cold water. The most homes in Israel have a boiler for heating up hot water. So if no kli exists at all for cold water, if so, then no kli exists at all for cold water that would be used for the Netilas Yadayim.
Well, I mean, Ernie, if we use this logic, and if you turn on, almost all houses have a hot water heater. Maybe it's downstairs in the basement, but that's still inside a container. And by the way, the ones in Israel they're talking about, the Dut Shemesh, the only reason the water flows into them is while gravity, is a factor. The reason they're under, even the ones that Dut Shemesh are under pressure. So as you're pulling water out, there's water pushing in. So I don't know what we're talking about in terms of koch gavra. Just because it's on the roof, they're all under pressure.
The koch gavra was opening up the faucet.
Okay.
So the first spurt.
So you have to have a container for it to go through into first.
The water has to be stored in a container.
Great. So always turn on the hot water, even if the water is not hot immediately, it's in essence coming from that container first.
If you use the initial spurt, I agree.
Ernie, I'm looking ahead a little bit. I didn't see anything about the hand pumps. The old days you had to pump, you had to pump the water with your hand.
Yes.
That's definitely a koch gavra. That's not even discussed here as an option.
Do we have those options today?
No, we don't. I'm just curious, halachically, if you had to pump the water.
I would think that is koch gavra.
But that might be koch gavra, but there's no accumulation of water because it's pulling directly from the well.
Correct.
So there's no container that's going into.
Right.
Well, the well is a container.
Well, no,
after the
a
pump.
natural well would not be a kli.
Right.
Oh.
It has to be a kli. So a boiler is a kli based on this Yalkut Yosef.
No, but Ernie, I think in Israel they have tanks of cold water in the roof because the apartments have boilers inside the apartments, electric boilers. So they need like in South America, every building has a tank on the roof And when you build the building, they bring water with special pumps up. And then whenever, like Chaim says, whenever you use water, the water from the city fills the tank again, because the pressure in Uruguay is not very great. So they use what is it called? The siphoning process. If not, you wouldn't have water in the houses. So I'm sure in Israel it's the same thing. They need the pressure of the water, so they put it on the roof and then it goes down by gravity to the different units. Anyhow,
Basically, what it says here, no kli exists at all for cold water that would be used for netilas yadayim. Therefore, there would be no basis for referring this time from a faucet, even in case of need, the way the Piskei Teshuva is explained. Now, they're assuming, Chaim, that they're not going to wash with hot water. First of all, on Shabbos, it's problematic because with hot water. But let's say during the week, l'chora, right away in the initial flow, it's not going to be that hot. So that might be an answer. Mikan nilmad, let's see what the Piskei Teshuva says here. Mikan nilmad le'inyan barzei hamayim b'yameinu, faucets in our day. He says there's no heter. Bear is open and close the faucet. We're not sure that water is coming from a kli. That's siphoning. That we're not sure that the pipes are directly connected without some kind of hefsek to springs or rivers where we would say that pouring connects it. Look at the footnote. The question of whether nitzuk chibur, the pouring of a liquid from its source, connects the liquid to the lachit stance of the source, is subject to a machlokes in the context of mikveh. The Mishnah, referenced by the Rashba and the Rambam, states that if a mikveh is exactly 40 seah of water, and one individual immerses, begins to exit with some water on him, but still maintains one leg in the mikveh, the water on his body is considered to be connected to the mikveh, and the mikveh is still kosher. And therefore, if a second individual immerses at that time, it would be okay. So too, in this case, the water being poured is still being considered to be one unit of a revius, although the halacha is generally not in accordance with this opinion with respect to a mikveh. Some authorities hold that Chazal were more lenient for netilas yadayim. And since you could do netilas yadayim directly from a spring or a river, l'chora, as long as there's no break, he's saying
what happened?
we're not sure that
You can?
that the pipe is connected. I still don't understand that because we still needed a kli. Gam harbe pami makor hamayim heim berot umagrim she'enim mainot v'narot. It's a reservoir. Doesn't have the halacha of a spring or a river. Means a natural mikvah, like a spring, a flowing river, you could dip your hands in and have it be mitar, similar to a mikvah. Now, Rav David Brovsky, in a sefer called the Netilas Yadayim, say the Achronim, he mentions the Zakan Aaron, the Tzitz Eliezer, the Yaskilavdi discuss whether one can consider the boiler located on one's roof and the pipe which brings the water to the faucet to be a vessel. The Tzitz Eliezer permits one to wash from a faucet by opening and closing the tap in extenuating circumstances. Nowadays, cold water is not stored in boilers on rooftops. And hot water, depending on how it's heated, is often not stored in a separate boiler. Accordingly, one should not wash his hands from a faucet. So according to this conclusion, one who does not have a cup, such as in a public area like a mall or airport, may not simply wash his hands by turning on the faucet. Rather, it's treated like a case where one is unable to procure water for the netilas yadayim, and we're going to discuss in the next year, what do you do if you don't have any water? Okay, page 76. we will conclude the halachic portion of the shiur with the following question. What is the halacha if one performs Netilas Yadayim, recite the bracha on Netilas Yadayim, and then you decide that you don't want to eat bread? Must he eat some anyway to avoid reciting a bracha levatala on the Netilas Yadayim? The Ritva addresses this question and rules that one need not eat any bread, since at the time that the person washed his hands, his intent was to eat the bread. Says the Ritva, if he washed his hands but he didn't have in mind to eat, afilu l'shaito, and even though it was a short time, you have to go back and wash again and have in mind to eat. And after the first Netilas Yadayim, he wouldn't be able to eat. He had in mind to eat. Then he changed his mind. That's okay. You don't make a bracha levatala by not eating something. The makevan shenatol yada garmu labirchas anatila shalei mevarich. The bracha is on the washing his hands. He washed his hands. At that time, he did want to eat. I possibly like this for my Rebbe. He agreed with me. Ratzvi Pesach Frank explains the rationale of the Ritva. But to understand it, we need to first present the following introduction. The halacha is that one who hears a bracha, that one knows is a bracha of Atala, should not answer Amen. If one listens to such a bracha with intent to feel his obligation for this bracha, he has not fulfilled his obligation. On the other hand, if one listens to a bracha over a beverage with intent to fulfill his obligation as well, and the beverage spilled before one drank it, the second individual has fulfilled his obligation, even though the bracha was seemingly nullified. What is the rationale for the distinction between the two cases? Rav Frank explains that in the second case, the bracha was necessary at the time it was recited, unlike in the first case where it was unnecessary, even at the time of the bracha. With that in mind, Rav Frank now explains the rationale of the Ritva that we just learned. Ratziti loim rapi masha kosov Ritva chulin, the misha bircha netilas yadayim eino mechoyev lechol dafka. That one who made a bracha on netilas yadayim is not obligated to eat. The Yemeinu wrote se'od lechol eno ochel. He doesn't have to eat. V'lo have a bracha levatala. The b'shas bracha kedin asa. He had in mind to eat when he made the bracha. The chiyuv birchas the time kach tiknu kisherot selechol. The bracha of netilas yadayim was misakein when one wanted to eat. Then you're chayv netilas yadayim. V'chayin birchas hamitzvah. As long as he wanted to eat when he made the bracha birchas hamitzvah netilas yadayim, you were okay. For example, in the case where he was with the liquid spill, that's an oinus. The mitzvah that he made by making a bracha for it didn't go away. B'shas bracha kedin also them is saying it's a bracha l'vatala. That would not be considered a bracha l'vatala. The Stei Chemed infers from the Rashba in the next source. So it seems that the Rashba disagreed with the Ritva. A bracha is not recited when it's not fully dependent upon the person making the bracha. Let's say it's some kind of mitzvah that you need your friend to do. It'll come out, you'll make the bracha. You need your friend to help you, and your friend doesn't help you, the bracha is mevatal. You go matnas aniyim. So we don't make a bracha on tzedakah because it relies on another person to accept it. We're making a loan to a poor person. According to the Rashba, no bracha is recited upon mitzvos whose fulfillment depends about the actions of another person. Would seem then that according to Rashba, one's bracha is nullified if the mitzvah is not performed. Consequently, one can conclude that the Rashba would require one who recited a bracha at this time to eat at least a kibbetz of bread. Footnote, would seem that according to Rashba, one is obligated at this time only when eating at least a kibbetz of bread. The question of how much bread must be eaten to necessity at this time will be addressed in Shiur 5. So Rabbi Tzalel Stern in the B'Tzelach Chachma brings this Rashba. Ra'iti b'sefer stechemet, shemevi divrei ritva shizkarti, who brings the ritva, that if you change your mind after the Netilas Yadayim and after you made the bracha and you don't want to eat, that's okay. We don't require him to eat anything. Because of Allah, mitshuvas harashba nira that he doesn't hold the same way. High svara. Chazal should have made a bracha on tzedakah. Given the b'shas bracha, daito l'kaima mitzvah. Listen, if at the time of tzedakah you had in mind to give the tzedakah, now all of a sudden the ani doesn't want to accept it. But if you have the right thing in mind, then the bracha would have been okay according to the Ritva. If the other guy changes his mind, al kein masik b'steichemet sham. You should force yourself to eat something, so you shouldn't make a bracha l'vatala. The Gamar Ritva efsha yoyded l'chadchila b'lo echrach in lasos came, and maybe the Ritva would agree as well. However, the B'Tzelach Chochmah suggests that one can distinguish between the ruling of the Ritva and the ruling of the Rashba. The Ritva is specifically discussing Netilas Yadayim, where he ultimately did perform the mitzvah. He washed his hands, dried them. You make the bracha al Netilas Yadayim, you fulfilled it. On the other hand, the Rashban is discussing mitzvah tzedakah, which is not fulfilled as long as it does not give the money to the poor. Therefore, no bracha is recited on giving tzedakah. Onam milvad shebizdechemet shamevi mechaverim nichbodim deleslu kavose. There were people who disagreed with what the Rashba said. Od zos ki lefi masha kosafti leel ein shum raya sharash b'chol hakol. He says, with a second look at it, he doesn't really think the Rashba is arguing with the Ritva B'din said. They're talking about two different cases. The Rashba is dealing things with tzedakah that perhaps at the time that you make the bracha, you're not going to be able to fulfill it. The Shema Lo Lo Kabbalat tzedakah, the other party maybe will decide not to receive it. Oh ha'anaka, helping an Eved get out of his avdus, ayin shab. Uveritva, harei mefurish ki hanoitel yodav lachilo, mevarch al tislayim, v'achach nimlach. There's nothing, you didn't do anything wrong. After Vadim is started lechatchila b'li kol echrach ein lasos came, you shouldn't do it lechatchila. But we're talking about a b'diavad dikadin that he already made the bracha. Rav Stern concludes his piece by stressing that this ruling that one need not eat bread if one changed his mind applies only in this case. But one may not recite a bracha on food and then decide not to eat. As in that case, since it has not performed the act upon which the bracha is associated, it would be a bracha batola. For example, you say bar name is zoynos, and you end up not eating the cookie. Well, that's a bracha batola. This is different. This is you washed your hands, dried them, and you made al netilas yadayim. You fulfilled the mitzvah. Yes, because at the time you did it this time, you had a mind to eat. And Chazal were Mesaki and Tisadayim in that case. But if you change your mind, don't want to eat, you have not made a bracha batola. We'll conclude with a machshava thought. What is the reason why washing hands is referred to as netilas yadayim? Netila means taking the hands. Is there any taking happening here? The answer is that in truth, the word netila means to elevate or lift up. Like it says, Hein goyim kemar midli. The nations are like a drop in the bucket. Uchashachach moznayim nechshavu. They're like a dust on the scale. Hein iyim kadaki tol. Their islands are like dust that blows away. Rashi says that kadaki tol refers to dust that is lifted up by the wind and blown away. Itol kavak hamisa, like dust that is elevated. The ola yedei ruach, that is lifted by wind. If it's fine dust, asher yinatel. So Rav Hai Gaon, cited by the Kolbo, follows this approach and suggests that netilas yadayim is called such based upon the notion, recording by the Gemara in Sota, that after performing netilas yadayim, one should raise your hands. Rabbeinu Hagoyin Zal Perish B'Tshuva Kilosh Netilas Yadayim Amnu Zal Al Shetzrech Lagbia Yodav Lamala Acharit Chitza. You should lift your hands after you wash them. He raised them and he carried them. When you wash your hands before you eat, you must raise your hands. Rav Yaakov Kohn explains that we see from the explanation of Hagon that the goal of the natil is to uplift the person so that he does not eat and drink like an animal out of natural instinct and with no control, but rather raises the experience of eating to a holy spiritual one, through which we can better serve our Creator. The netila thus gives a spiritual direction to the meal that is about to take place. B'yachas l'netilas yadayim, harishonim meviim es perusha shvav Hagon. They bring the explanation of Hagon shekosov shamila netila nov, that the word netila novas comes out mikach shela achar netila yesh lag b'yas yadayim. The concept is to raise. V'adavar nisbach laposach v'inatleim v'inasem kol yimei olam. Mashmos hadavar hu she'inyana shel netilas yadayim hi leromem es ha'adam, is to elevate the person. Adam yachol lechol kebeima. A person could eat like an animal. Mitoch dachafim, you dachafim shemekorim betalichim kimiyim. These are chemical processes that occur in your body. Mitoch gufo. L'lo shlita adachiloso, without control over your eating. V'kishur l'tzara ruchani shebo. So the netilas yadayim is the spiritual aspect of eating. We're supposed to elevate ourselves. We're supposed to elevate ourselves and sanctify ourselves for eating. We should be relaxed. Feeling of pleasure connecting to God. May we merit, use the netilas yadayim experience as a manner to spiritually elevate ourselves through the eating experience and use it as a method to attaining closeness to Hashem. one of the essays talks about Rav Moshe Feinstein, one should not wash hands before a meal in the bathroom. He allows washing hands before davening, where there's no other option. But you should dry your hands outside the bathroom. Rav Ovadia Yosef rules that you can use a bathroom for Netilas Yadayim before a meal. That's when it's separate from the toilet. If it's a restroom with a toilet, it's a Beis HaKisei, you should avoid Netilas Yadayim. You might want to read page 89, Netilas Yadayim in modern day restrooms. Okay, everybody, any other comments, questions? We'll continue, of course, next week. And those are the Daf Yomi. We'll have a Daf Yomi shir in about 4 minutes.
Shkoyach.